Shavua Tov. With everything going on in the world today, it is crucial to understand that the same God who brought about the exodus from Egypt, who smote the Egyptians with 10 plagues and split the sea, is still completely in charge of the universe. And everything that he did then, he can still do now. This is the reason why the Exodus is so central to the Jewish faith. We must remember it daily in our prayers because it tells us 4 critical things, at least, about the living God. The great Rabbi Don Yitzchak Abarbanel was the finance minister in Spain in the year 1492. He was so valuable to the king and queen that they offered for him to remain in Spain as a Jew, even as the rest of the Jews were expelled or forced to convert. The Abarbanel, of course, refused the offer. And in the liturgy of Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, there is one elegy called B'tzeiti Mitzrayim, B'tzeiti Yerushalayim, when I left Egypt, when I left Yerushalayim. And there's a mysterious melody for this section, whose composition is unknown. It goes like this. B'tzeiti Mitzrayim, B'tzeiti Yerushalayim. I read somewhere a theory that this melody dates back to the day of the expulsion from Spain, Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, 1492. Tisha B'Av is normally a day of sadness and mourning, but Rabbi Abarbanel instructed the Jewish musicians to play music to accompany the Jews as they left, as they were packing to go, because they were doing a great thing. They were maintaining their faith and refusing to convert to Christianity. And so therefore he wanted to encourage them. So the words, when I left Egypt, when I left Jerusalem, could easily resonate with Jews leaving their home, Spain, of centuries. So the Abarbanel was somebody who was deeply invested in the theme of Exodus, and especially Exodus from Egypt. Therefore, his commentaries on the Passover Haggadah are the most famous and the most satisfying. So let us see how he explains the initials of Rabbi Judah. In the Haggadah, Rabbi Judah gives 3 initials to divide the 10 plagues into 3 groups: Tetzach, Adash, and Be'achav. As you'd expect, the commentaries have a field day trying to explain why these groupings. The Abarbanel says it is foundational. These 3 groupings teach us 3 eternal truths about God. Number 1, God exists. He was the creator. Number 2, God remains completely providential in all human affairs. He is involved and watching over us. And number 3, God controls all the forces of nature. The first 3 plagues, the Tetzach, the blood, frogs, and lice, in Rabbi Judah's mnemonics, show that God exists. And when the 3rd plague of lice happens, Pharaoh's magicians must confess, quote, "It is the finger of God." Mission accomplished. And I will add that these changes in the very nature of the turning a river into blood, creating a swarm of frogs, and transforming the dust of the earth into lice, show God acting as creator. The second 3, wild animals, cattle disease, and skin boils, show God's control over what is done in the world, his providence. Animals, after the flood, were instilled with a fear of humans by God. But in Egypt, that fear was removed, and the animals became hostile and dangerous and scary. Diseases, whether in the livestock or on the skin of the people, such as the boils, can dictate much of human behavior as well. We can just remember a few years back when we were locked in our homes. So this group is successful in showing God's providence when the magicians of Egypt are unable to even stand in front of Pharaoh because they have boils too, because God has the final say in the affairs of men. The 3rd grouping, hail, locusts, and darkness, and the smiting of the firstborn, which is actually a separate thing, but it's still in this group, clearly show God's control over all of the forces of nature. And thus we learn those 3 eternal truths. Now the commentaries notice something interesting about these groupings. The first 2 of each group were preceded by a warning to Pharaoh. Pharaoh, there's going to be blood. Pharaoh, there's going to be frogs. But the 3rd plague, lice in the first case, came unannounced. And so it too is with the other 2 groups as well. Why so? Why announce twice and not announce the 3rd time? So the Abarbanel addresses this too, and he says that since the plagues all had educational purpose, and each group was to have its educational message, so once Pharaoh had been warned twice, he should have figured it out on his own, and he didn't need a 3rd warning. Others note that the third plague of each group was directly visited upon the physical body of the Egyptians. God sends warnings and reminders in increasing closeness to the one being warned. For example, in the laws of leprosy in the book of Leviticus, there is leprosy on a house, leprosy in a garment, and finally leprosy on the person's flesh. 2 warnings, and then the main gig. Ramban gives another reason why the first 2 were warned and the third not, because the first 2 of each group were potentially fatal. So it was only fair to warn Pharaoh in advance. But the third, lice, boils, and darkness, while each of those was extremely unpleasant and we wouldn't want to experience them, nonetheless they were not life-threatening. But here's a fascinating explanation given by the Khatam Sofer. And he says the first 2 of each group were preceded by a warning for a surprising reason: to allow Pharaoh's magicians to prepare to replicate those plagues. Wow! That raises the question, why would this help to have Egyptian magicians diluting Pharaoh's resolve by showing that they can pull off the same trick? So the Meshech Chochmah helps us out by pointing out another fact, another question. Why did this whole story happen to be in Egypt, the place of our enslavement in the first place? It could have been in other lands as well. And he answered by amplifying what the Abarbanel's educational understanding is. The whole world looked up to Egypt. This was the leading culture. This was the capital of sorcery and witchcraft. Idolaters around the globe were magnetically drawn to Egyptian magic. Lahavdil, just like great composers all flocked to Vienna. So God, who wishes all of mankind to recognize him, would do that through Egyptian influence. Show the great magicians of Egypt that God is superior to them, and the whole world will take notice. So God wanted those magicians to admit, themselves to confess, that they were outclassed, and to proclaim it is the finger of God. Now there's a fourth eternal truth that is so relevant to the way we take in the world. And this one comes from the leader of German Jewry in the 19th century, Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch. The Egyptians, say Rabbi Hirsch, committed 3 crimes against the Israelites. First, they took away their independence and control over their own destiny. Second, they enslaved them and acted as masters over them. Finally, they caused them great suffering, both physically and emotionally. The 10 plagues came to punish the Egyptians for all 3 of these. The first plague of each grouping, says Rabbi Hirsch, pays the Egyptians back for the disenfranchisement of the Israelites, taking away their independence and self-determination. So the river was crucial to the identity of the Egyptians. It was their deity, it was their lifeline. When it became blood, the Egyptians lost that basic connection. In the second group, the animals upon which empire was built turned against them. And in the third group, the crops and produce upon which they depended for their economic might were crushed by hail. They thus lost everything that made them proud Egyptians. The second sin of enslaving the Israelites and acting as if they were masters and kings over them was punished by the second plague of each group. You Egyptians think you're masters and kings? Even lowly frogs will now rule over you. You Egyptians think you're the strong ones? Cattle disease will weaken you. You will be ruled by an invisible virus. You Egyptians think that you control your wealth and sustenance? Well, you will be ruled by locusts who will come and consume everything that you have planted in your fields. And the third sin the Egyptians committed by causing suffering to the Israelites was paid back by lice, boils, and a terrifying darkness which paralyzed the Egyptians. When the 2 angels in the city of Sodom were urging Lot to leave quickly, they said, God is going to destroy this place. And they used an unexpected name for God, the Tetragrammaton, the 4-letter name of God that usually represents the attribute of divine mercy. We would have expected them to use the term Elohim, which connotes judgment. After all, the people of Sodom had sinned, and now they were going to be punished. Why use the name of mercy and not the name of judgment? Because it is mercy to all decent people in the world to know that yesh din v'yesh dayan, there is law and there is a judge, that evil will be punished and that good will be rewarded. We don't always see it, and sometimes we may doubt it, which can cause troubling feelings deep in the soul. But as the psalmist says, Ish bar lo yeda, an unlearned man will not know, and a fool cannot comprehend this, as the wicked grow like grass, and those who commit injustice blossom. For it is to destroy them forever. And you, O Lord, are exalted eternally. This is what Rabbi Hirsch is teaching us. To never forget that there is justice and there is the divine judge. He sees the evil in the world. He knows of the indescribable cruelty of the regime in Iran. And when he knows the time is right, that evil will be destroyed forever. So this whole episode of the 10 plagues teaches us 4 crucial things. God exists, God watches over us and our affairs, and God controls everything in nature. The God of justice will do justice, and that same God is completely present today. True, nowadays we haven't seen splitting seas, but that does not mean that miracles are not happening. When there was a previous early evil ruler in Persia, he was overthrown in a day as a result of a series of divinely ordered, seemingly random occurrences. Haman literally went from the pinnacle of power to the pinnacle of a tree within 24 hours. As it was then, so may it be now. And as we say every week at Havdalah, to the Jews there was great light, joy, happiness, and high regard. Kain tihyeh lanu, so shall this be to us.